Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
Congress just passed fiscal 2026 appropriations for most of the Department of Homeland Security in May, but lawmakers are already moving forward with crafting a 2027 budget for DHS. The House Appropriations Committee's Homeland Security spending bill pushes back on some cuts proposed by the Trump administration. Federal News Network's Justin Doubleday joins me now with more details. Justin, thanks for being here.
Good to be here, Terry.
All right. So where is the House Appropriations Committee in its version of the DHS funding bill?
Well, the Homeland Security Subcommittee passed its version of the 2027 spending bill last week, and it's expected to be passed through the full committee this week. And so they are moving along briskly, as they typically do with their own versions of the bills, these appropriations bills. And then the question is, what will the Senate do, and how will this all come together in time, as it almost never does for the end of the fiscal year? But they are indeed moving forward. You know, there's a lot in this bill, of course, across DHS when it comes to cybersecurity, when it comes to emergency management, when it comes to immigration enforcement and border patrol, border security as well. So just a month or so after they passed that fiscal 2026 bill for most of DHS, there is now 2027 steaming along pretty quickly.
It's got to be complicated to figure out what the baselines are. I mean, so much of DHS got a lot of funding in the one big beautiful bill, and then there were shutdowns and holds on appropriations. We still have the reconciliation bill to fund ICE and CBP since they weren't part of that bill in May. How does this 2027 appropriations bill complement all of those other pieces?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, of course, it funds the non-ICE and CBP parts of DHS fully, so to speak, but it also includes some funding for those agencies as well. Even Republican appropriators, though, are a little bit miffed at the fact that they are basically being bypassed by, the reconciliation process and other sort of committee priorities in advancing the ICE and CBP funding, which, of course, is happening this week, $70 billion for ICE and CBP over the next 3 years till the end of this Trump administration. So Homeland Security Subcommittee Chairman Mark Doubleday, he said this is not the way that we should be funding the regular operations of agencies, but it is the way that Republicans are choosing to move forward right now with ICE and CBP, and then they will have to figure the rest out with the pieces that they are now putting into place through the regular appropriations process in the coming months.
Where are some of the places in this bill that the appropriators diverged from what the administration requested for Homeland Security?
Yeah, let's look at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. The subcommittee's bill includes about $2.4 billion for CISA next fiscal year. That's actually $400 million more than what the Trump administration had requested for CISA's budget. And it's kind of a flat-ish budget when you compare it to what Congress passed in 2026, but at least it's for CISA's, in CISA's perspective, it's not a cut. As the Trump administration proposed. It would include $31 million for CISA to hire mission-critical positions. And if you remember, CISA has lost roughly 1,000 people over the last year or so. That's 1/3 of its prior workforce totals, but it is now hiring again. CISA has been approved to hire about 300 people in the near term. Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin acknowledged that CISA probably needs to hire 600 folks back. So they are really doing this kind of yo-yo. And this funding bill would include some money so that CISA could really ramp up that hiring in the coming year.
What about FEMA? That's an organization you and I talk a lot about. What are they prioritizing there?
Yeah, they're prioritizing grant funding, non-disaster grant funding to be specific. They met the administration's request for the disaster relief fund, roughly another $28.3 billion to do the year-over-year replenishment of that fund. And of course, as we get closer to the appropriations process, as we get closer to the end of the fiscal year and into the next year, that number changes often because of what happens with disasters and FEMA's disaster relief fund often being tapped out maybe faster than they would expect. So that's one area to mention. But then non-disaster grant programs. The House subcommittee here largely rejected the proposal from the White House to cut those programs by $1.3 billion. So there's a whole host of non-disaster grant programs that FEMA runs. For instance, the State Homeland Security Grant Program. The Trump administration had requested about $350 million for that program. House appropriators are putting $506 million in place. Then there's the Urban Area Security Initiative. Again, the White House had put forward $415 million in the budget request for that program. House appropriators put in $600 million. And you can kind of go down the list, but those are two of the big ones. Also, the FEMA's training exercises and technical assistance programs. That includes programs like the U.S. Fire Administration, the Emergency Management Institute. The bill allocates $415 million for those programs, and that's roughly double what the administration had proposed. Those do a lot of training for like state and local first responders. So that's another big area where House appropriators really wanted to shore up FEMA's grant funding.
What other headlines caught your eye as you perused the bill?
Well, there's the Department of Homeland Security Inspector General budget. This is not like a huge difference, but it's relatively big in the sense that the DHS Inspector General is overseeing a lot right now. DHS has a massively inflated budget compared to where it was 2 years ago. Really high-profile mission right now. The Trump administration had proposed cutting the DHS Inspector General's budget by about $30 million or so year over year. The House Appropriations measure rejected that. It would allocate the $227 million that was the annual budget for the Office of the Inspector General. And that would allow the DHS OIG to hang on to about 85 employees that they would have had to cut if the administration's proposal was enacted. So oversight at DHS, very important to a lot of lawmakers right now. The DHS IG under this appropriations request would maintain, their staff and their funding.
Well, as you say, this is really just the first salvo. Lots still to play out as we watch this bill make it through.
Absolutely. And we are just at the start of the summer. It's going to be interesting as we get into the fall and the end of the fiscal year.
That's Federal News Network's Justin Doubleday. Justin, thanks for giving us this update.
My pleasure.
You can find his story at federalnewsnetwork.com.